I had no clue what I should expect to make. I had no clue that I should negotiate if I got offered a job. Like, I shouldn't just take what they offered me. I should get, like, there's so much practical in the world of how money works that we've hidden from kids because culturally it wasn't acceptable. Like, most people don't know what their parents make. Most people don't know how much money their dad makes.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 28 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. Hope you all are having a wonderful Friday. Hopefully you have some time this weekend to chill out, unwind a little bit. I, on the other hand, will not be having any of that until Sunday night when I am flying over the ocean to Milan. Yes, I'm going to be flying to Europe next in a couple days, but that's not even probably going to be very relaxing because I hate sleeping on planes. But anyways, doesn't really matter. I'm still going to be releasing episodes while I'm gone, so never fear, because I know you were all so worried about missing the Andrew Deitch podcast while I was gone. But let's just jump into the show. My guest today is my friend and mentor of almost a decade, Chris Burns. And Chris is an entrepreneur. He's a father of 3 kids. He's a financial planner, former youth pastor, and he is a podcast and radio host. And after he left his job as a pastor, he got into the financial planning and life insurance world, where he discovered his passion for helping people with their finances. And eventually, he founded his own financial planning company called More Than Money Financial, which he is running right now. And he's helping tons of people reclaim control of their lives by giving them unbiased financial advice. And I don't know if you guys are very familiar with this, but the financial planning world is littered with sales bonuses and gimmicks, and they're all tied to how much of a certain product that the financial planner can sell. So like if you work for a life insurance company, obviously you're going to recommend life insurance to someone, right? But More Than Money Financial isn't affiliated with any of those other promotions or bonuses or companies, which means they always have their clients' best interest in mind, which is really, really cool. And he's also the host, Chris, is also the host of the More Than Money radio show that airs on Atlanta's Newsradio 106.7 every single Sunday at 8 a.m., and if you live in the 21st century and you don't listen to the radio, or you're too busy sleeping in on a Sunday morning, you can listen to the More Than Money podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher if you are an experienced podcast consumer like moi. I'm sure many of you out there are not using iTunes to listen to this, so you can also find the More Than Money podcast just by searching it up. But I really like listening to Chris's podcast because, let's be real, finances can be very, very intimidating and sometimes just pretty hard to understand, you know. Most people don't want to think about them, or they have no idea where to start to properly plan ahead, or maybe they have significant debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, who knows, and you just don't even know where to start, right? So on Chris's show, he does an awesome job of breaking down the intimidating and the confusing financial jargon, and he breaks it down into, practical bite-sized pieces that everyone can understand. And on this episode of my podcast, he gave us some really practical tips for people of any age to implement today to start taking back control of their finances. But I'm going to stop talking, and I'm not going to spoil the rest of this podcast. I'm going to let Chris share that himself. So without any further ado, give it up for my man, Chris Burns. All right, Chris Burns, we're live, dude.
We're live. It feels the same as it did a minute ago.
I know, right?
I don't know.
It is cool. That's why I really like these clip-on mics, because you don't have to hold anything. You don't have to like get up next to the mic or anything. Like I did a podcast with my friend and we had to hold the mics the whole time. And when I wasn't talking, I'm like, should I hold it up to my mouth still? Am I making weird noises with my mouth?
Do I look awkward?
Yeah.
And what other context do you ever have that conversation where it's like you're sitting with somebody and you're trying to act like everything's normal, but you're like holding this bulky equipment and I've got the huge headphones.
Yeah.
Like, so if I'm doing a podcast, the other person wears the headphones too. So now, like, you can't really see them through the haze of equipment.
Yeah.
But it's like, we're fine, we're normal. Nothing weird's going on.
I've heard, I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast a lot, and sometimes they'll go headphones and sometimes they won't. And he said, he sometimes prefers the headphones because he says it almost like, it's like a mind meld where like you're in each other's heads almost.
That's right.
Where it's, in a normal space, you're hearing kind of other sounds, but in the headphones,
it's like all that exists is Andrew Deitch.
In
and
your
I'm
brain.
just stare deep into your eyes and we have this amazing conversation. No, totally, man. In fact, I'm trying to figure this out because my kids are so into YouTube, and my older son is really trying to create videos and put them up all the time of his gaming, his Minecraft success. And he's done 2 or 3 of them with me, which is really funny because I'm so bad at games that he just destroys me, and then his friends love it. But the point is, when you're trying to do like the actually recording yourself and recording the game, that whole thing, I've tried to start learning about the technical aspect of that, because it's like, well, if you want decent sound, you gotta have the microphone, but you can't block your face because then you destroy the picture. So what kind of microphone? And the deeper I go, the more it's like, it's pretty complex.
I think you kind of have to go with like a boom mic or something above you, like
a lot
like
of them
TV,
use that, yeah.
or a front-facing like shotgun mic that mounts on the top of your monitor, maybe.
Yeah, I need to figure it because I've looked at a few different ones, but the one I saw that I liked the most was this kid. I don't know, on YouTube, Preston Plays. You ever heard of this guy? I don't know. There's like a million
I don't
of them
follow
now.
Gaming, but
you don't follow gaming. You're not a.
Just
Just wait till you have children.
I know.
I've watched more hours of other people playing kid games than I ever like. My kids sit and watch other kids play the same games they could be playing. When I was a kid, it was like, just play the game.
Yeah, but you could in their defense, it's almost like watching football or watching basketball or watching tennis.
Yeah, don't defend them. I don't defend defense. It totally makes sense. Like, I totally get it on some level, but it's fascinating the amount of time and effort they put in, and how high quality. Like, I've been trying to figure it out now and transfer it to my son. Actually pitched my podcast on his last YouTube thing. He was like, "Dad, I'm going to give you a shout out." And I was like, "All right, buddy. I don't know how many 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds are interested in this, but man, go for it."
Dude, that's so funny.
Never know. Build an army.
That's hilarious. Well, I feel like that's a pretty good segue into what you do and all that kind of stuff. Your son's giving you shout outs, so I'm going to give you a shout out.
It must be special. It must be good.
Well, I actually heard about your podcast from his YouTube videos.
Really? Holy cow. It's wide-ranging impact.
No, but so Chris, in my intro, I've already kind of talked about this, but you're the host of the More Than Money podcast, and you are what's your title of your company? You're the head dude?
The head dude. I was funny because I've always just said I'm the principal of, because that's kind of the language of the industry. But then a guy helped me with social media, put up my Instagram as CEO, and I was like, oh, I don't know. It's a very small, like CEO. I've always thought that was hilarious when it's like I'm CEO of a company with like one other employee.
Yeah, it's goofy.
And they're the CFO. I don't know. I mean, it's like, okay. But there was a small part of me that was like, oh, I like that. So I haven't done anything about it. I've kind of let it ride. So you can call me the CEO. It's fine.
All right.
Whatever you like.
And that company is Investis Financial, right?
Yeah, actually. So you can help with this because you're genius. We've been going through this whole branding crisis of. I called the company Investis Financial. I don't know why. I was trying to figure out a name for it.
It's pretty good, Investis.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because for me it sounded like a disease. The more I heard about it later, I was like, Investis. But the show is called More Than Money, and the more we did the radio show and the podcast, and that became more popular, people would call and they'd be like, "Hey, this is Investis Financial," and they'd be like, "Oh, I have the wrong number." Like, they didn't know who we were because they just totally, it was More Than Money. So we're really, I think we're changing it officially over to just More Than Money Financial because people know what that is.
Yeah, I was going to say that and that name kind of like rings a bell. People kind of, if they've heard it on the podcast, if it's more recognizable, then go for it because if Investis doesn't really mean anything to anybody, then
I am keeping Investis the name, though, in case the CDC ever comes to me and says we're trying to figure out what to call this new terrible disorder.
It's a disorder. It's a disorder that's sweeping America. It's the disease that no one's saving any money.
The debt crisis.
Yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. But
I read a study recently that I think it's over 75% of Americans polled that did this massive study that their number one stress point is their finances. So if you think about heart disease being the number one killer in America and how related to stress that is, and then you take that next step and go, well, the most stressful thing for most Americans is their finances. So that actually is a interesting, how much is there a link between how I feel about my money and my health, my longevity, death? Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
It's pretty crazy. I saw a post on Facebook the other day where it was like a little, those pictures that's just text. It's not really a picture, but it's literally it's like a meme, but not.
I got that.
It's literally just text. And it said, sometimes I just sit and think about how expensive it is to live.
Man, or have kids. Okay, so you don't have kids yet, but I was a hippie and I had kids really young. And I was like, it's great, it's fine. We're going to be, we'll figure it out. If you actually sit and compile the amount of money that you spend on the life of a child, like from just average from birth through college and now beyond, where it's like a lot of folks are like, well, I'm going back home. Like, it's an insane amount of money, and that should never stop you. Well, I'll qualify that. It should not be the primary reason you have kids or don't have kids, but I never thought about it like really in detail, and now I see it, and it's like, holy cow.
Because also, these kids have no way of providing anything.
Nothing.
They're just
Nothing,
leeches.
right? Yeah, they're leeches. I hope my children never listen to your podcast. No.
Not just leeches. I'm not saying that's their only thing they contribute, but I'm saying as far as a financial standpoint, they're not contributing unless your son's YouTube channel starts monetizing and making some money.
I was talking with a friend yesterday, and they were talking. I mean, I don't know what it is we saw, but just like nature channel stuff where you see in the wild, like in the pure physical laws of nature, like there is zero pity, zero remorse. And so if something doesn't seem to have a purpose, like it's just cut out. Even parents killing children because I can't take care of 6 babies, so I should only have 4, right? That kind of thing.
And I can eat them.
And I'll eat the other 2. Like that's exactly what they were talking about. And I was freaking out. I don't know how I missed that class. Like whatever biology class we talked about that, but yeah, just, I'll eat the 2 that are the weakest kind of a thing. But humans, like, we have this weird shift that's all about, well, no, I will prop up and support and honor the weakest. Like, if they're weaker, that means they should get more respect. Like, that's just something hardwired into humanity. Often, maybe not always, often, right? And you see that especially with finances. Like, what is it, other than just the pure, like, growth of the species thing, that would make me say, all right, so I'm going to have this child, I'm going to stop sleeping. My personal time is going to drop dramatically. My finances are going to go entirely out the window. They're going to go to this baby. But I want to have multiple children. I want that experience over and over. And I know they're going to be a teenager one day, and God help us, because when they are, they're going to hate me. Like, they're not going to want to talk to me. But yet I want that, and that's really what I value in life. Like, that's so counter any other part of the natural world. It's totally fascinating.
Yeah, and it is weird too. I feel like a lot of parents, that's kind of their fulfillment of life, kind of, it becomes their purpose.
Yeah.
To raise these kids into fully functioning, awesome adults. But, that's kind of the gamble that you take too, because you could have a child that, has a disorder or has, mental issues or commit suicide or a whole host of things.
You're opening yourself up to so much heartache that would not exist if you just were like, I'm okay. And yet the possibility of so much love too, right? But it's such a gamble. It's like there's nothing safe. We adopted our youngest, our 2-year-old, and because I also have 13, 11, and 2 is my range. We took a decade off, which people love to hear. But we adopted our youngest, and everybody would ask us all the time, like, well, aren't you nervous? Like, what if like her family of origin, like which what she gets from them, like she has deep issues that never would have, like that you're not prepared for or something. I'm like, how is that any different than when I had, biologically had my two sons? Like, there's just as much of a possibility of anything crazy happening with them, as it is with just because my daughter's adopted, and yet because you're just opening yourself up to that. I think we just feel more in control. It feels more normative if it's like, well, it's my biological son, so I know what issues he could have. Well, maybe, right? But
and you want to believe that your biology wouldn't have any complications or problems. So that's that ego thing. You're thinking, well, I wouldn't have a screwed up kid.
Yeah.
If it was from me, they wouldn't, be this way. And obviously there's obviously some validity to that point of view, because obviously, if you have, I don't know, if that child had a history of, mental illness or whatever, obviously that might play out. But like you said, there's always that unknown factor, even in your own biology.
And it's huge. It's like the whole idea of, excuse me, I'm sorry. Terrible audio here. When you go through like recovery, like 12-step stuff, for anything, step one of recovery is I'm powerless. And it's this idea of I find strength to progress and become healthier and overcome addiction and stuff in my life by starting with this point of being powerless. And that really just means I'm giving up the illusion of control. And I've just found that as a parent, in relationship, as a business owner, an entrepreneur, like there is this necessary starting point of I need to just give up the illusion of control. Like, not that I don't have any impact, not that my decisions don't matter, but to think that I in some way could plot out the perfect situation that my kid's going to not have those issues, or they're not going to struggle with addiction, or they're not going to have a mental, emotional mental disorder, or that they might not be in a terrible car accident tomorrow when they were the healthiest kid on earth. And like I just came back from a funeral. Guy my age, who kids were off riding with his mom in the car, and he wasn't there, and a drunk driver hit them, and suddenly you have immediate loss of life. And it's like just a normal day, like just totally wake up, everything's fine, normal, and the kids are out doing what they've done 100 times, and suddenly everything changes.
Yeah,
Mother
it is
passes
crazy.
away, child passes away. It's insane.
And that's something that, we can go into this a little bit later when we talk about, I think I would love to talk about the deepness of what you do in your business and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that my parents are clients of yours, basically, for the listener.
Yeah.
And my parents were kind of talking about, well, my dad, you asked the question, well, what happens if you die? What happens to your business, right? Do the kids take over? Does your wife take over, all this stuff? Well, let's go even crazier. What happens if all four of us die in some kind of freak accident? Then what?
Right.
Like, those are just factors that, most people they don't want to think about it, so they just don't.
Yeah, and you don't want to plan. It's easier to avoid something because there's this weird, I don't know if this is true for everybody, it's true for me. I almost have this weird mental thing that if I don't think about it, I'm in some way helping the chances of it not happening. Like when I was a kid, I was definitely OCD, and my family has a lot of obsessive compulsive stuff, which is a great reason to adopt. I had the opposite. It was like, get out of the OCD. Like if we adopt out of the circle, we won't have the emotional, we won't have all this anxiety that I have. But I definitely had that intuitive feeling of like, well, if I let myself go down the road of thinking about that, then maybe that's like what happened, like self-actualization.
Like law of attraction kind of stuff.
Right, like it's something that could happen, and I do think like adults never say that, but it's almost like if I just don't talk about my spouse dying, or if I just don't talk about something happening to my kids, maybe that will create that reality. I don't know.
Yeah.
And yet, what actually happens is then the unexpected does come, and hopefully for most of us it's not something tragic like that where it's a child dying. I mean, I don't know what I would do. I have no idea. But because we've never thought about it or planned for it, then suddenly we leave ourselves with huge issues to deal with because we didn't want to deal with it. Anyway.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. That was eloquent. But but Totally, and I would almost say my business, I'm not a financial planner, but my business is really more just saying, have you thought about what's coming and how are you prepared for it? So, yeah.
It is pretty crazy. You mentioned kind of how your job as a financial planner and all that, and I'd love to kind of talk for a second about like how you even got to this point of being a financial planner, because you have a pretty cool story. And like you said, you have 3 kids, one's adopted. You recently started this, financial planning business. Let's go back for a second. Baby Chris Burns.
How far back do you want to get?
I mean, we can go. I mean, we don't have to talk about baby Chris Burns for an hour or anything. But it is weird how I've started a lot of my podcasts with this idea, but. We tend to think of people as just stationary objects. You see an old man and you just think he's an old man.
Yeah.
You don't picture him 80 years ago when he was a baby. And that's something that especially, I think people that are my age tend to just think of that. But when you're old and you're 80 or whatever, you're probably thinking of people maybe in that way a little bit, maybe.
Totally.
Because you're seeing, oh wow, like I used to be this and now I'm this. So what did this guy used to be? How did he come? And so, especially when you're a kid, you think of everyone as stationary because that's all you know. You haven't been around long enough to realize that things change and evolve. But I mean, even for myself, I've changed so much, even in the past 6 months or whatever.
Totally. Well, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, but so I mean, take us back.
As I tell my story,
Yes,
I'll tell some of your story.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating what you said, because I think especially with your parents, like with my parents, as a kid, you just kind of view that as this sacred thing. They've always been locked in time there, and as you see their story emerge, and you go, oh, holy cow, you experienced this. Yeah, man. So I grew up in Atlanta. So I've been a Southern kid. My dad is a pastor, has always been a pastor, and
is he still alive?
He is still alive.
He's still a pastor?
He's still a pastor.
Wow.
My mom and dad are both living. They actually are in Rome, Georgia, so they lived for a while. We grew up in Atlanta area, and then they moved to St. Louis. My dad's a professor as well as a pastor. He's got 2 doctorates. He's a genius.
Wow.
My brother's got his doctorate. I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the only one who does not have a doctorate. So here we are. But anyway, they live in Rome up near Berry College now. So I had a church up there. But because I grew up in really a pretty conservative Christian world, with my dad always on staff at a church, I was a pastor's kid, which is trouble, I guess. But I always was I was the opposite of that. Like if the scenario is that the pastor's kid is trouble, I was like the kid that would feel the guilt for everyone else. I remember very clearly in my little private Christian school I went to, the principal coming out when I was in like first grade and lecturing all the boys because boys had been peeing on the walls in the bathroom, which was it was a terrible thing. And I felt so much guilt, even though I had not been peeing on the walls because I never got in trouble, right? I was perfect. That I went up and like apologized for the class. Like I went up and I was like, I will take the blame. I was a little Jesus, the first grade Jesus. I was like, I will take the blame.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
and I can't even imagine what he was thinking. Like, kid, come on, kid. But yeah. So I was always worried about the rules. My family was very anxious because we do all have varying levels of like anxiety and OCD and stuff. So I was a very like worried kid. But grew up in the church, and kind of that's all I ever knew. And I don't know, man. I never, in a million years, if you'd said, will you ever do financial planning or anything like that, I would say, no way.
That just wasn't on the radar.
Yeah, when I went to school, I went to the University of Georgia for like 3 weeks, which was great. And then I was dating a girl who now I'm married to, but when I was, like, it was very clear to me that if we were ever going to be together, she was going to school up in northern Indiana, and I was at Georgia. And I just started, we had been friends for a while, but she was my boss at a summer camp, Camp All-American, which you've been a part of.
It's a place to be.
It's a place for me. She was my boss at the camp, and so I would, like every day I would have my 8 campers, and she would be like, she was the day camp director, and I would just find a reason that we had to go inside if she was like sitting at her desk, just so we could walk by her desk, and I'd be like, oh, we have to go by there. And anyway, I was like all summer I just worked at it, And she finally started dating me. But then I'm at Georgia, and it's like, man, we've got like 1,000 miles. This isn't going to work. So I left and worked for a semester at Perimeter Church, which is where I had grown up. My dad was a pastor there. And did landscaping for a semester, and then had the opportunity to looked at transferring up to the school where she went, which again was this tiny little school in Indiana. And I think my dad was just excited that we do anything. Like he was like, just please go to school. Yeah, definitely. You should consider that. And so I applied up there, got in, went up and left and went up to school, and didn't know anybody except for my girlfriend at that point up there, but ended up loving it. It was great to get away and kind of have to grow on my own. But it's weird thinking about, because now I spend every day talking to people about money, and it's made me reflect on like, what did I learn about money when I was a kid? Like, I think the deepest lessons that we learn about how the world works, we gain with no one ever saying anything. We just gain from watching our environment. And so now I look at it and go, man, I had these really distinct lessons about how the world worked, what my value system was, how money fit into that. That changed dramatically later on in life. But I never would have said my parents taught me a lot about money, but now I think about it and go, man, I learned like the lessons I was taught about money was that money here had very little significance. Everything was about eternal treasures in heaven. I had no clue, and I love my parents. They did so many things well. I got to put that out there in case they listen to this. They're amazing. They were amazing. But man, I knew nothing about I remember my first job when they were offering me a salary. I had no idea if what they were offering me was decent or not. It was $30,000 a year. And I remember thinking, what would I do with all that money? Like, I had no concept of it.
And you're like picturing that at the end of the year, you're going to have $30,000.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember thinking my first job was like, at Regal Cinemas or something. Like I just random job, and I'd work all week and have like $100 or whatever from hourly wages. And I had nothing to spend it on other than whatever girl I was probably dating in high school. And it would just all go to that, and I'd be like, this is tons of money, because I didn't have to think about anything else. So I had a very little practical idea of how any of that worked. And
that's a pretty familiar story, I think, for most kids.
Which I think is unfortunate. Like, I really do think it's a weird cultural reality that we will literally dig deep into learning chemistry and biology and history and the nuances of language and all these things. And I was a liberal arts kid, man. I mean, I was like a theater kid, and I got a history degree from school. I love that stuff. But zero practical discussion of like, how does money actually work? How do you be an adult? A friend of mine calls it adulting. Like, where's the adulting class? And it's just like, well, hopefully your parents gave you that. And it's a mixed bag, but especially with finances, like, very few people have any clue, and who cares about finances? But what you do care about is, what do I want to be and achieve, and what do I dream about? And boy, finances undergirds that, right? I just said undergirds. It's beneath it. It's like it's foundation for that.
I like undergirds.
Yeah, but I was a hippie, man. So I went to school and had long hair, and I was up in Indiana and dating this girl, and like, within a few months, we were like, we should get married. And I was I somehow convinced my parents and her parents that was a good idea.
How old are you guys?
Agreed. I was 19 when we got married, and we were kind of like, it's fine, we're going to be fine. And then, not to go TMI here, but as we're getting married, she started taking birth control. She didn't feel great. The hormones were all messy and stuff. And my brother, who is also a genius, he's got his doctorate, he kind of swings between philosophies. Like, he spent all of high school and college just basically researching all sorts of different ideas about how the world works and how it exists, and he would just kind of swing and be like, I'm this now and I'm this now. I think he was in a Catholic phase at that point, so he sent us a book on like why birth control wasn't helpful anyway, and like why, that we should totally go natural and stuff. And we were like, that's cool. Like, we were 19. Like, okay. And amazingly, like 7 months after we got married, she was pregnant with our son. So
funny how that works.
It's incredible how quick that can happen. So then we had 2 kids while we were still in school, and
Wow.
It was craziness, man. So before and my father-in-law, who is an amazing guy.
And he's a doctor too, right?
He's a doctor. So both my in-laws are optometrists.
I was going to say.
They're incredible. But I think he maybe had this premonition, like he saw this coming, and he actually wrote an essay to us before we got married, like while we were engaged, of like how life would basically stop if we had kids before we finished college. Like he was just like, you have to, like, you will probably not graduate if you have the kids beforehand. And then he like went into like, it was like a serious paper on this. And then of course, like 6 months later, he's gonna have a grandchild. So yeah, so it was crazy.
Yeah, it's weird because like objectively, if you kind of back up from like, at 19, the reasoning of like officiating it and getting married and everything, a lot of times is because of the whole social stigma of like, we're probably gonna have kids, so like, obviously outside of a religious standpoint, I'm sure everybody, like half the people that came to our wedding probably thought like she was pregnant or something. It's like, why in the world would they get married? And we were so offended by that. I remember this one guy that had been a youth pastor of mine when I was a kid. Oh man, this guy's a trip. He had been a youth pastor of mine, and he saw Meredith, and she said something about we were getting married that year, and he was like, "Are you pregnant?" Like that was his immediate response. Are you pregnant? And she was like, what? Like she was so angry. I can't believe you even suggest.
Like, what are you talking about? And now I'm like, I am sure my children are going to want to get married when they're like 18 or something. And I'm going to be sitting and saying all the reasons why, guys, listen, this is a good idea. I'm going to write an essay. And I totally have it coming. Like, what am I going to say? What are you going to do, man?
Can't really say much.
Yeah.
Times are different now.
When I was a kid, it was normal.
But that's
we walked to the ceremony.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's so funny though. But so like obviously growing up as a young parent, life comes at you real hard. Like real hard.
Yeah, I don't, it kind of put us in a weird spot. Thankfully the school we were at, Taylor, which is up in Indiana, had just started graduate programs, and so all these young couples who were married, who were just about to have kids that were coming to the graduate programs came, and suddenly we had this community around us, and if they hadn't come, if it was just undergrads, we were just like the freaks. So I was like, okay, all right, you guys enjoy that. It's like it was just so different than everybody else there.
Totally.
But because of that, so it kind of put us in a place where all of our friends, and this has never stopped, when you have kids, you end up becoming friends with other people with kids. It's just like naturally, because you're in the same stage of life. So we were always in this weird spot where people our age, we felt kind of awkward because they had their own issues, but not the same issues we had, right? And then, so we had all these friendships with people that were like 10 years older than us, that had kids the same age, but then we were really young. So then that weird tension kind of created throughout.
It is weird when you kind of mature past your friends' age group. It's very strange.
It's interesting.
And I hate to, be this guy, but I feel like in some ways I've kind of done that.
Yeah.
And obviously you can make arguments for the complete opposite. Like, you know, what are you doing with your life, Andrew? You didn't finish college, all this kind of stuff. You're the complete opposite. Right. But, from other standpoints, I would say that,
it's all what you're measuring it by.
Exactly. And, and I'm not even trying to make an argument for or against that. I'm just saying, in general, a lot of times I do feel disconnected from a lot of people my age, because I'll meet them and their priorities are just in a totally different place. And that's the conversation I continuously have with my younger brother, because he is in a very unique spot where, he may or may not go to college, and that's not because of he's stupid.
No, he's super smart.
He's very
freakishly smart. Yeah,
he is very smart.
One of my heroes, man.
Yeah, he's really clever and just like very. And that's the thing that's frustrating for him, is a lot of times he can't articulate the words that he wants to, or he feels dumb, or he feels, he has anxiety or whatever, and he's like, when I'm around people, sometimes I just feel like everyone hates me or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you're so smart. Like, come on. You can't think like that.
Well, I mean, I've always thought that he was smarter than you, but you're just better looking. So it's like, which one would you rather have, right?
I don't know, man.
When you say you matured past your friends, I was like, you just are better looking than your friends. Like, I don't know. It's hard to actually put that on a scale of like who is more mature, because I look at some of my friends that didn't go that route, that were like, they're still single, or they maybe waited a long time to get married. And there's ways that I feel like they're more mature than I am because it's like my life, I stopped that natural process, whatever that is. I didn't ever have that, I live on my own in my 20s and like figure out the world. It was like, we have kids. So in some ways, I think it probably took me deeper than other people, but in other ways, I think I probably missed some of the formative stuff because you just kind of take a hard right turn.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely arguments for and against all of that, but like the main thing that I was kind of saying with my brother is like he feels like a lot of the people his age are just like really focused on going to college, getting hammered all the time, doing drugs, having sex, whatever, and that's their priorities. And it's like every time I meet someone, I feel like I just can't even relate to them because I'm on like a different place. And that's sometimes, and it's weird now because when I was in those 4 years where I was quote unquote supposed to be in college, it was always awkward because people would say, where are you in school? That's the first thing everyone asks you. And, you have to be like, well, and you have to like, it's so annoying. This is why I love podcasts, is because you have a platform where you can really lay everything out on the table and fully explain your point of view and get your opinions out and have debates and all this kind of stuff. And when you're having small talk with someone at church or whatever,
what are you supposed to say?
What are you going to say? Like, and then they just think you're a loser most of the time.
But aren't they just looking to check a box off too?
Oh, totally.
Like, how many people actually give a rip what's going on in your life when you have that conversation, right?
Or they're saying it so they have the opportunity to be like, Steven's at UGA, and he's like kind of going back to how parents only, they find their purpose in their kids' life. Once those parents, once their kids go off to college, it's like, what do they even do? A lot of times they're still so involved, and all they talk about with their friends is, Steven's got, this weekend they're going to their formal or blah, blah, blah. And it's like they literally have no life outside of their kids. That's the reality for a lot of like Johns Creek moms and stuff. Like I go to the gym in Johns Creek and I overhear these conversations. Like even when they're in high school, all they can talk about is their kids' college search, and it makes me just want to vomit because I'm just like, how do you not even have anything to talk about? Like I get it that your kids are your life, but like, don't you have somewhat, like your kids are kind of self-sufficient at this point. They're in high school.
It's a weird blend. I mean, it's like, I meet with people all the time in their 50s and 60s. So we have people across the board, but I've generally found most of our clients, like people that want to come talk about how they're going to plan for the future, are either like about to have kids or they're about to be empty nesters. Like they're in those are just two really normal spots, right?
Totally.
So the people that are about to be empty nesters up through retirement, it's changed my whole understanding of the world to spend so much time just talking with them and hearing their thoughts and their wisdom and their experience. And you see this sharp divide between people who really are living in that moment, like they still view life as this full of wonder, full of opportunity, like the future is something they're excited about and they're excited about the experiences they're going to have, versus like, my best years are behind me. Whether those best years are the kids being at home, whether they were my athletic achievements in high school, it's just such this struggle all the time of, is my life about what's already happened? And now it's just like, I'm coasting until the end, or am I still fully engaged now? Like, this is where I'm at and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and most people aren't honest with where they're at.
Yeah,
like a lot of people are not, they don't want to be honest where they're at. Like you said, the athletic achievements, a lot of times, let's say someone puts on a few pounds or whatever, they're not going to change their Facebook profile picture for a a
You talking about me?
No,
Thanks,
I'm
man.
not talking about you.
You just bring it up. That's fine.
I'm not talking about you.
I don't feel awkward about that.
You look great, man. I'm
Thanks,
serious.
Man. I appreciate
you
it.
You do. I have a few other people in mind actually, but I'm not going to mention their names, of course.
It gets even more so as you get older because like people with things like LinkedIn now, like I can't tell you how many times somebody has LinkedIn with me, and then when I meet them in person, I have no clue who they are. The LinkedIn, like I look at their LinkedIn image and go, okay, I have an idea who this person is. So I can look for them if I'm meeting them for the first time. And it's like, literally, like that picture was 10 years ago, and like life has happened since then.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want you to know who I am, day to day.
Yeah, it is creepy. It's like getting catfished.
It is.
Getting professionally catfished. That's totally what it is. But, like people, they don't want to be honest. They don't want to look themselves in the mirror and say, this is where we're at. And I think that's the first step in being able to change, is recognizing where you're at and realizing what you actually have to do to get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I was talking with my brother again the other day. We were talking about, with his job, he's constantly lifting heavy stuff at the golf course. And so his back, he's having all these issues with his back. He's like, I stretch sometimes. And I was like, we should probably go to yoga more often. I feel like that will really help. He's kind of like, I've gone a few times, but like, it just gets back to worse. And I'm kind of like, but that's kind of like saying I took a shower, but then I just got dirty. So what's the point? It's kind of like with life, you have to assess where you're at and figure out, okay, like, yes, I've let myself go, or yes, my finances are in a disarray or whatever, but you can't just put on blinders and pretend like that's not that doesn't exist.
I've wrestled with that, with the worldview behind it, like, not to make it too deep, but I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how, like, do you have the worldview, like I was raised in a Christian worldview, which a lot of religions would fit into this, in this sense of like, this earth is necessarily doomed, was kind of how I was taught. Mm-hmm. Like, this earth will pass away, there is no question. Your life will end, the riches you have will be nothing. And so what was the practical impact of that? Like, I realized, for instance, that even though we talked about how important it was to care for the earth, for instance, like that was taught to me, like, well, yeah, I mean, God made the earth, so you should take care of it, etc. The reality was, because I was so confident this thing was going to burn, like the earth was going down, how much should I really worry about it?
And like, you're going to be probably gone.
It'd be great in theory to take care of the earth, but in the back of my mind, it's also like, but it's going to go, like, there's nothing I can do to stop the annihilation that's going to happen. So it's more of a nice thought, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, I'd meet these friends who were atheists, and it'd be like, no, the earth matters because it's all we have. Like, if I don't fix this, that's it.
Yeah, where are we going to go, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what are we going to do? And it was very urgent for them, and I didn't realize how much that kind of the fatalism idea of like, well, it's all going to end, it doesn't really matter anyway, was impacting my practical day-to-day reality. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the exact same thing with what you're talking about with like, well, why would I take a shower if I'm just going to get dirty again? It's like, well, if this is bound to be done, who cares? And I had that viewpoint when I even started work, when I got out of school, where it was like, I didn't care that I was going to make $30,000 a year, and that, first of all, I didn't understand the fact that I couldn't raise a family on that. I had no idea, practically at that point. But also, it was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, my treasure is in some future far-off eternal situation. So who cares? I mean, as long as I have enough to get bread, as long as I have enough to whatever. And I think some of that I still hold to, but there's just a change of my belief about it. But that was like, there's this core ability just to almost justify my, not laziness, what would you call it? My
complacency.
God, man, you built for this, man. My complacency. Nice.
I'm trying to up my vocab because I'm listening to myself a lot. Yeah. And so I'm like, I keep saying like all the time. And I also say awesome and cool all the time to describe things. So I'm trying to up my vocabulary, sound a little smarter.
Man, that's awesome. It's really cool that you're changing that.
And I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and now that I'm listening to them from a point of view of being a podcaster, I'm trying to pick up on words that I'm like, oh, that's a great word.
By the way, now is the only time I can say this naturally. Just, you're doing an incredible job.
I appreciate that,
podcast, man.
I really appreciate it.
And watching you just go after it and killing it. So anyway, it's been great. It's been informative for me. I told you already, we're going to definitely steal some things from you.
Yeah,
and I'll try to give you credit, but
I really appreciate that. I was going to actually mention on your podcast the one that you did with Ty.
Oh yeah.
Because you were talking about the story of how you met your wife and how you were walking past her at camp. Yeah. And I was like, I've heard this story before from Chris. I was trying to think of the situation where I heard that, and I was like, oh, he told it on his podcast.
Yeah.
But it was weird because I wasn't sitting in the room with you, and I was so far removed from you when you told that story, and it was in the past. But it's creepy how when I listened to your podcast, I felt like I've heard it. I was in the room with you, and And that's the magic of podcasts, really.
It's different, yeah.
It's so weird because people listening to this right now, they feel like they're sitting in the room with us.
Yeah, well, they're happy they're not now. They're like, golly. But it totally does feel that way. You develop this relationship, and you just want to, you find yourself just wanting to like hang out and be like, I totally know you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just that I like the role you played in that film, like an actor or something. Like when I listen to podcasts where they interview some of these folks, I'm like, oh, we would totally just hang out. Like we have the same views about life or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, totally.
It's not just, it's funny because my podcast often is like really short. We take the radio show we do on the weekend and we just split it up into a few podcasts for the week. But we're adding a lot more interviews and stuff because I love the long form idea of just really knowing who somebody is. So,
Totally.
It's
yeah,
cool.
and as I was going to say, I love the podcast with Ty. That was awesome.
Man, thank you. I appreciate that.
But so we were, to go back kind of to your story, you were talking about, raising the kids and all that kind of stuff. So what were you doing for work? You were a history major, right?
That's a good question. So we both did graduate. I was a history major, but we were taking loans out for school. Like we were getting help from our parents for some of school, and then we were taking loans out to help with some of just living expenses, which I had no idea would be years later still trying to repay those loans. So I didn't understand the level, how the debt.
You're just like, free money.
It was like, oh yeah, we'll pay it back, sure. But also, we just did anything, like odd jobs. I worked in the cafeteria at school. I ran the pool desk, handing out games and equipment. I did a lot of ropes course stuff. I ran the ropes course at the school. And Meredith did the same thing. She took odd jobs. She cleaned houses. It was kind of like, what can we do, just anything possible while you're in school? And then I knew we really needed more income. And so there was a big church in Indianapolis, and I had not really, I'm amazed by this. I've not spent a lot of time thinking about what do I want to do. Like, I knew that I loved history. I loved teaching. I thought either I'll go and be a history teacher or a professor, or I don't know, I could be a lawyer. I guess I just didn't have a well-formed idea. But I grew up in the church, and I'd been really involved in like teaching and things when I was a student. So I just went to what was natural, and I got a job. My first job was at this church in Indianapolis while I was still in school. So I would drive an hour back and forth. But it was part-time kindergarten, first grade worship director, which does exist in the world. And so literally worked like 20 hours a week, like doing programming for like 6 and 7 year olds, which is amazing that exists. And loved it, and was making I think they were paying me like $16,000 a year to do that. And so for me, it was like huge change. And then that church offered me, when we were finishing up school, they offered me a full-time job working with middle school students.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And just jump in. And again, with very little thought about, is that long-term what I want to do? What does that even mean in terms of getting money? I was like, well, I really did have the belief that if you work full-time, like it doesn't matter what you do, like if you work full-time, you'll have enough money. That was kind of the way I thought about money at that point. And so in my mind, well, as long as I was working full-time with middle school students, of course we'd have enough money. And that wasn't quite true. But that was definitely a mindset. So I started doing that. And my wife and I kind of commuted back and forth from Indianapolis to this little school, and then eventually moved down to the city. And she started working at the church too. So I'd say it's more like we fell into it because we needed, that was just the next natural thing than like an intentional, that's what we want to do when we grow up kind of a thing. That
makes sense.
Yeah.
And then how did you end up coming back to Atlanta and working at Preller?
Well, we were at the church, but it just felt like, well, what's the next step going to be? I guess if I'm in the church, maybe I should go to seminary and become a pastor officially, or what should we do? And the church I grew up in back here in Atlanta, Perimeter, found out I was doing middle school ministry and called and said, hey, this is your home church. We know you grew up here. We would love you to consider coming and interviewing to lead the middle school thing down here. And being a big church and everything else, it was like, man, that's an incredible opportunity. Again, without a lot of time spent going, is that our long-term direction? I mean, I try to think about my mindset back then. I don't even know that I was thinking about the world that way. It's a weird thing to think about now for me. So we moved the family down, and crazy, like when we moved down, we were living in northern Indiana, and it was obviously cold as all get out, and we moved in December down to Georgia, and we were trying to sell our house. So when we left, this was right in like 2007, our furnace broke the day we were leaving. So we had a home warranty. So I called the home warranty people and said, hey, can you come fix it? Because it's broken. We were like literally driving down with a U-Haul. All of our stuff was in the basement of this house we were trying to sell. So like we hadn't really brought much of our stuff at all. And we just renovated the whole house. We'd spent like just months like doing all of it by hand. Like we found there was like an 1890 house. So we found the old hardwoods underneath. We refinished everything. Well, we left. I called them. They took them 2 days to come out. And the entire time they weren't there, it was like 20 degrees. So everything froze. So then they came and fixed the furnace. And when they fixed it and it thawed, it burst. And so suddenly we had a terrible flood at our house, and we weren't there to catch it. So I only found out like a day later. I mean, the water was just pouring for like a day. And a day later, like one of my neighbors had to grab a hammer or something, and they called me and asked if they could borrow it. And then they were on the phone with me, and they're like, man, I'm outside your window. Like, something's going on in your house. Like, they're freaking out, and they got more and more freaked out. And I'm sitting there laying on the phone, and the guy was like, you mind if I go through a window to try to figure out what's going on? I was like, go for it. So he finds an open window or something, and I just hear him getting more and more freaked out. And he's like, there's like a waterfall. Like, your ceilings are caved in. And I was listening. Our house is for sale.
Oh my gosh.
So it had been going. So we turned off the water, but we did, it was like $50,000 worth of damage. All of our stuff in the basement was ruined because there was like a foot of water in the basement. So it was this like just devastating experience where we went through homeowners insurance, and we were able to, they had brought out disaster people, and they cleaned it out and were able to sell the house and everything, but we lost so much of what we had. And it was this big, like for us, for Meredith especially, just felt like all these things that were like foundational to us, these possessions that we hadn't really thought mattered that much, were suddenly gone. Plus we didn't have a lot of money, and the way that the home warranty company worked, which I'm sorry, I'm a financial planner. If you're listening to this and you own a home, it's good for you to know this, like homeowners insurance. I mean, ours was one where they said, okay, well, if you lost this, for instance, piano, we had a piano that had been given to us by her parents. I'd say it was a $6,000 piano. They were like, yeah, well, the replacement value is $6,000, so we'll give you $3,000. And then once you go buy a new piano, you send us the receipt for that, we'll give you the other $3,000. So the only way to get all the possessions actually back was to have us be able to front the money to go buy the new version of those things, and then they would give us the rest of the money. But we weren't in a place financially to have an extra 20 grand lying around to be able to do that. And so what actually happened was we ended up getting checks for like half the value, and we just didn't replace it because we didn't have the extra money to go spend to buy it to get reimbursed the rest. And maybe,
funny how that works.
It's amazing how that works.
Wonder how they make money.
Yeah. So we got hosed, and we didn't even, like, again, at that point.
No pun intended.
At that point, yeah. At that point in my life, I had no idea, how to handle that.
And how old were you at the time? Like early 20s?
Yeah, early 20s, 23.
Jeez.
Probably.
I'm 23.
Yeah. Just didn't know what to do.
That would suck.
Yeah.
I'm in a weird place right now, though, where I feel like, on one hand, like when I was living in Spain last summer, I was kind of like just living there with very few possessions. And I was like, if all my stuff back home, like, caught on fire or
went up in flames,
I wouldn't be that mad. But now that I'm back, I would be so mad. Wow. But it's so weird how my perspective, I was like, I want to live this, because one part of me, I'm like, I want to live this minimalistic lifestyle where I have as few possessions as possible, leave as much waste as possible, live in the woods, this whole like crazy concept. And then the other side of me is like, I want to be balling out of control with a mansion and jet skis and, whatever, all kinds of stuff, a trampoline room or, just like, so it's weird how I have these two completely conflicting ideas, and obviously I'm going to probably land somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But
what power does that stuff have over you?
It's
I'm
weird.
Totally going to be Excuse me, man. That's terrible. Don't
all
edit
good.
that out. We're good.
Not the first time.
So there's this the Macklemore song from his first album, but it's "Make the Money, Don't Let the Money Make You." He has this whole song about that, where he's kind of wrestling with this idea of, okay, I'm becoming more successful. I'm getting all this. I have these resources I didn't have before. How do I handle that? Like, how do I walk out into the world and be authentic to who I am while also having more assets? And that's a weird, like, a lot of people walk through that. I think all of us do on some level, where it's like, is it changing me to have success or to have financial resources and stuff? And how do I deal with that? And this for us was a defining thing, because I didn't think I cared much about possessions, and I don't think I do still. But I'll tell you what, like, those things that carried significance, like a piano that was a family gift, or pictures of family that, this is back before you had the level of digital pictures that we have now, so if you lost pictures, it was like you lost pictures.
They're just gone.
That stuff was like, okay, I value this. Like, that had real value to us. So
that stinks. I've thought about that so much, about pictures, because on one hand, you've got these physical pictures and you have them in your hand, but pictures can go bad. Like, over time, the pictures can kind of like eat away, or you lose them in some sort of home disaster. And on the flip side of that, now we've got all these, they're backed up in the cloud, and
right,
they're all backed up. You can always access them from any device. But what happens when the Google servers that your photos are on catch on fire, or all this stuff? And I'm sure that they have, their servers are all daisy chained, or however they do it, where if something went down, it would be backed up somewhere else, because they've just got so much stuff. But
in theory, it's always redundant until it's not, kind of a thing.
Exactly. And it's like, what happens when what happens when complete disaster strikes, or what happens when some sort of apocalyptic event happens.
The Walking Dead scenario. Yeah.
What's funny is I just released, so this is just coming full circle. So this morning, latest podcast just came out with my friend Graham Burns, spelled differently, and he works on Walking Dead.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So if you want to listen to that podcast, you can go listen to it. But
his
last name is the same.
I will listen to it, Andrew Deitch.
His last name is spelled different, but it's Burns, and we were talking about The Walking Dead. Pretty good.
That's really
but anyways,
cool.
Really Walking Dead scenario where just like everything goes to shit, and you have to figure out life in this post-apocalyptic. And I've been thinking about that more and more. Like, what would happen if the quote-unquote grid goes down? And I've been getting more interested in ancient civilizations and stuff. In school, that didn't really interest me that much, because I'm like, it's boring, it's old. But now it's like, what were they trying to tell us, or what were they trying to leave? Because also you think about it, what kind of message am I trying to leave? Because on one hand, I have this podcast that's going to stay on the internet, hopefully for as long as the internet's around, because I'd love to kind of like leave that. It'd be cool for maybe one day my kids to listen to it or something like that. It's kind of a cool thing to have. But what if the quote-unquote grid goes down? Or what if I don't pay my server fees and all my episodes are lost? Or what if, anything? So many things could happen. And these ancient civilizations, you have to think like, what were they trying to tell us? But you also have to think about, were those people the freaks? Like, were those the normal people, or were those the psychos? Because there's definitely people in today's society they have a bunker for like an atomic nuclear situation, and they've got a whole bunch of food. What are those people saving and all that kind of weird stuff? Is that going to be the only stuff that survives? And then when someone finds that later on in life, they think that all of us were saving up food and had underground bunkers? No, there was like a very small minority of people that were doing it.
They were the ones that made it.
They were the ones that made it, and they were the ones that get found. So do they think we're just weird? Like,
if you really want to go full circle, those must have been our ancestors, because we're still here.
So true.
So like we are the descendants of the freaks that like had the bunker, right?
It's very true.
I'll tell you, I've met with so many people, more than I expected, especially because I did the planning stuff. So like they'll start walking me through their plans for whatever, who have serious like apocalypse ready scenarios at their houses and things. Like that you would never know this, but now you find out they've got like 6 months of food stored. Like they're ready for anything. I'm like, man, I am totally. Like, as much as I prepare for, like, you have unexpected, like, death, like, I don't have anything. Like, I would be the first one gone. Like, if there was an apocalypse scenario, I am dead in less than 3 days. I don't have any food storage. I don't shoot firearms. I have zero hand-to-hand combat skill. I'm basically food for the group.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can view myself.
It's kind of messed up, but it's somewhat true. And you do think about a city like LA or Atlanta or a giant city like that, what would happen in those types of scenarios? Like everyone would basically just die.
Yeah,
no one has any idea how to get food. You know, our system just like closes down. Like, wait, what do you mean the grocery store doesn't have food? That's the only place I know where to get food.
Right.
Like we don't even know how to make or get food. Like I don't even, I wouldn't know the first thing about farming or killing an animal. Yeah. And that's something that I think is gaining a lot of popularity these days, is people trying to get back to that kind of primitive stuff, because that's what gives people a real, purpose or whatever. They get a very primitive feeling from that. But
regardless of whether that kind of thing happens, which I totally... How can you say it wouldn't? I mean, historically it sure has happened numerous times, right?
It's totally plausible.
But I do think about a lot, how far am I removed from, like how different am I really, how far am I really removed from those people? And I definitely felt that, I'm going to skip ahead, but only just to make this point, when I went from getting a salary every other week kind of a thing to launching my own thing, or in my case, I was 100% commission in my first job in financial services. That was a stark, like, I suddenly, it was like ripping away off the Band-Aid of life is consistent and dependable, and that's how money works, and suddenly it's like, oh, this is not how it works. Like,
yeah,
it really is kill what you eat. It really is hunter-gatherer. We just put a facade over it of, oh, I get paid on the 15th and the 30th until you're fired.
And you think that's stability.
Right, and it's totally, we almost trick ourselves into thinking that, of like that is, I can expect that, I can count on that.
It's totally an illusion.
Until it's gone. And all of us experience that in our life, like we suddenly have that reality because we're fired or because we start a business or whatever it is.
Or your parents kick you out of the house or something.
Your parents kick you out of the house. But it's like how you deal with that reality of, oh, there is no one else who's going to be my safety net here. I guess I'm more connected to my ancestors than I thought. Like that's how they lived, but it was very in their face often.
Totally. Yeah, it's just easier to be a person nowadays. It's easier to just stay alive, I feel like, in some ways, But I feel like that's also a big reason why a lot of people kind of lose their purpose, or they have, in a lot of hunter-gatherer societies, like I've listened to a few podcasts of this guy named Justin Wren who goes and helps the pygmies in the Congo, and he helps them dig wells and all this stuff. And they don't understand the concept of suicide. Like they don't have that. Like no one kills themselves because they feel connected to their tribe. Like literally it's a tribe. They're so primitive and they live in the woods. And the idea of killing yourself just doesn't exist, because all they're trying to do on a day-to-day basis is simply stay alive. Like that is their purpose, is to stay alive. So to not have a purpose, that doesn't exist in their society. It's so weird, because we're in this society where we're so bubbled in, and it's just so simple and easy. You go to the grocery store, buy some food, you go to work and put some time in, but like, what does it all really mean, And so everyone's on that search, but it is weird how you're saying you're so there is that connection to our ancestors, where some of them, their purpose was just to stay alive, and that's why we're here.
And you imagine there probably weren't a lot of discussions for most people in history about what do you want to do, what do you want to be, who do you want to become. Like we remember those people because they made a mark on history, right? So that we remember the Shakespeares, etc., like people that truly diverged from their family of origin and kind of went into these amazing things. But most, like the dramatic majority of people, it was just very clear, like from the outset, that this is kind of the life purpose. I'm going to stay alive, and I'm going to be what my father or mother was. Like that's kind of it.
And before Shakespeare was Shakespeare, he was just Will or William. Like there's literally, I saw a billboard the other day. I think it's for a new show.
I was just saw it this morning.
It was like something about like before he was Shakespeare or something. I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, one time he was just William.
That was a really neat way though to slide in the advertising. How much are they paying you for that? Was that like?
It was so undisclosed amount.
It was so natural. Like I didn't see it coming.
I didn't know if that was a parallel thought or we both saw the same billboard.
I did see that billboard, but I wasn't thinking about that. But you're right. Maybe it was. Maybe subliminal.
Maybe it was subliminal too. They're getting in our head. I thought that was a good billboard though. I don't see many good billboards. That was a good billboard. Yeah. Made me almost want to watch the show. Almost. I don't watch any shows though. Really, but
I would probably I was thinking about that too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Shakespeare in Love. I was a big fan. When was that? Like you were like not. You were. A big,
I don't even know what that is.
child.
What is Shakespeare in Love?
It won Academy Award for Best Picture. Like it had to be the mid '90s or something. It was a movie.
Was that the redo of the Romeo and Juliet thing?
No, it was Gwyneth Paltrow. This is totally where we want to go, right? And
Totally.
And what's his name? The brother of Voldemort. All right, so Voldemort was come on, the amazing British actors. His two brothers.
I couldn't tell you.
I stink. I would be able to tell you any other time than when I'm on your podcast.
It's a funny like American thing. We always want to know actors' names. Like apparently that's pretty uniquely American. Like,
nobody else cares.
Yeah, like in other countries they're like, why do Americans know every actor?
Like they're playing a role. I don't want Joseph Fiennes. All right, so his brother Ralph Fiennes was Voldemort, the English Patient. Almost a great roles, but Joseph's a killer actor. He's a Shakespearean actor. But he plays, this is a movie, like a romantic comedy, which is making me sound great, from the 90s. But it was totally that look at like what would Shakespeare have been like in normal life. And I was like, oh, they just recycled that. That seems to be the way that we do media now. We just recycle.
I hate it.
Just bring it back around.
I hate it so much. I'm so done with all these superhero reboots. I'm so done. I'm so done. Like, come up with an original idea. I get it that everyone loves these classic superheroes.
So have you seen Baby Driver?
Haven't seen it yet.
Holy cow. It was incredible,
and it's an original idea.
It was incredible. It was, first of all, it's an Atlanta film. So not, like for a while when Atlanta became big in film, I feel like Atlanta films were really just like, if you knew Atlanta, you kind of knew it was filmed there, but they didn't highlight Atlanta. It was like, it happens to be, they would even call it a different city. They'd be like, it's Seattle. And you're like, no, that's Atlanta. But this film was like actually like celebrating Atlanta, and it was a fantastic, crazy film. It was amazing.
It's so funny you say that. I literally just like got the chills because I was like so excited that you were saying the same exact thing that my friend said, because now it just validated it so much more that I want to go watch it.
It's a fascinating
The
movie.
guy that works on The Walking Dead, he worked a few days on the set of Baby Driver, and he was telling me the exact same thing, that like they're not trying to just say, oh, we're in this city. They literally like use like Buford Highway and like we're gonna take Buford and go down to this street or whatever.
It was so much fun to watch it because it
and
was
like
one
Goodfellas
of the
Pizza's in it or something.
Octane Coffee, like
that's so cool.
They actually highlight it. Like it's like one of the first shots in the movie. The guy's walking into Octane. They like do close up shot of the cup with Octane's logo. And I was like, that's where I love to drink coffee. Like it was so cool.
That's so sweet. I have to go see it.
Yeah, it's worth it. But it's just also a totally original, fascinating movie. Like totally different. And you go.
And I love car movies. I love music. I love Atlanta.
Flip out, man.
I need to go see
everything
the movie.
about it. You flip out.
I need to go see the movie. And that's what I was saying on another podcast recently, that I don't watch that many movies recently because I don't know, a lot of times I'm like, it might suck. You know, like I don't want to waste my time. But when I get reviews like that, I really do appreciate a good movie. So I'm definitely going to make it a point to go see that movie because it sounds really awesome.
I was really excited about it, and the whole way that they approached it. I've seen a lot of car movies and stuff, and this was such a different angle on it.
Oh, I love it. I'm excited to watch it for sure.
Yeah, but I totally am. Even in my business, and even in the way, even in your podcast and stuff, it's like, how do you create new creative ways of discussing something? There's nothing new, right, in the world, but how do you do it in a fresh, original type way, instead of just going, oh, I like what I'm about to do. Oh, I like Andrew's podcast, so I'm going to copy pieces of that for myself. Totally shamelessly going to do that, but if I was real, I would love the idea of not doing that.
Well, there's this cool idea of remixing that's really, it's a big thing nowadays. Obviously we've got tons of songs on the radio, like you're saying, like taking an old concept and making it new. And everything that's ever been created is always kind of drawing inspiration from something else.
Sure.
But it's like, if over 50% of it is just straight copied from something else, like, come on. But if you're taking a chunk of it and doing something else with it, like, I think that's cool.
I love that you use Calvin's music for the podcast. Like, it's just such, it's cool, it's original, he's so creative, man. I was like, totally, okay.
Yeah, that was another thing is there's all these kind of legal rights that you have to have when you use music, and I just didn't want to get into any of that, and also I want to showcase my friends that are talented, so I, of course, hit him up and was like, dude, I need like literally a chunk of music that I can just play over my transitions basically, and it totally works.
That's really cool.
And on one hand, I'm kind of thinking, oh, do I want it? Because he gave me a handful of songs that I can use. And on one hand, I'm kind of like, oh, should I switch it up and like use some other songs? But on the other hand, it's almost kind of like my theme song now, where when you start my podcast, you hear that music and it almost gets you in the mood for it. That I kind of think I'm just going to keep it. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it because I really like it.
It becomes part of the experience.
Yeah. When I listen to other podcasts and they have the same intro music, I love it. Mm-hmm. I like sing along sometimes if it has words. And it gets me stoked about it. Like there's this one podcast I listen to called Tangentially Speaking.
Okay.
With Dr. Chris Ryan. It's really good. But the beginning, it has this like kind of, I don't even know what to call it, like Mexican music. And in the beginning, there's someone talking in Spanish, and I have no idea what it means, but I say it every time that it plays. It's like something papachango or something like that, and I just think it's so funny, and I always say it, but I have no idea what it means.
And it's more just like it's
like mano papachango or something like that, and it might mean something terrible, and I just cussed out somebody in a foreign language.
Can I go on a small tangent?
Of course.
So I'm in a Lyft the other day. I'm on a business trip, and I'm in this Lyft, and a song comes on. It was one of the shared cars, where you can pay a little bit less and I'm cheap. So it was like, all right, this song comes on. That's a good idea. That's 90s. There's that classic 90s Soy Emperador. It's if I can't remember the name of the artist, I'm gonna flip out. I'm gonna lose my mind. Anyway, I'm not gonna sing it for the podcast, but it's "I'm a Loser, Baby, So Why Don't You Kill Me." That song, right?
Yeah, I know that song.
Yeah, totally. It's
by,
I'll look it up. It's not Bush. No, it's them. Him.
Cake. Is it Cake?
It's not Cake.
Beck.
It's Beck. Okay.
Hey, I knew something.
Anyway,
that song probably came out like when I was a child.
It was when you were a
child.
I
knew the name. I feel proud.
But
I feel very cultured.
Such a cool song, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in this Lyft, and both the people, the driver and the other person, start singing it, and they are singing like sore and full of fear or something.
I don't know what the word is. I just realized by you saying soy something, I was like, oh, I don't know the words.
Right. They were both 100% certain. Like, I'm listening to them sing, and they don't know each other, but they're singing the same exact lyric. Like, it was like sore and full of fear or something. I'm a loser, baby. And I was like, that's just a Spanish. Like, I had to chirp in because I'm a jerk. I was like, he's saying soy emperador. It's I am a loser. That's in Spanish, right?
Oh, that's so funny. I never knew that. And I didn't know what he was saying either. I thought he was just mumbling something.
We spent like 20 minutes arguing. Where I don't know why I cared so much, but they were like that was like their like.
For 20 years
they've been singing that. Like, the song had so much meaning to them, and it didn't mean at all what they thought it meant. And I just thought that was like totally fascinating about how we approach anything, where like you say that you love that opening to the podcast and you always say those words, and for all you know, it means like I have herpes. Like, you just have no clue it's not, the meaning is not it's just the meaning is whatever it happens to mean to you for your experience of the podcast.
That's so funny. It's so true. It's so true. That's so funny. So you're saying soy un perdedor?
Yeah,
like soy un perdedor.
I'm happy you sang it. And
that's so funny because I had no idea what he was saying. I literally thought he was just kind of mumbling stuff. I would just mumble.
It's Beck. It was 1994. And
the song's called Loser, right?
It's a good year, Loser. But yeah, it just means I'm a loser.
Huh.
So he just says
saying it again.
And then says it again.
Huh.
But they were.
Wow.
I gotta tell you exactly, because what they thought it was so funny to me.
Did you write it down? What they thought it was?
I totally did. Sore from head to toe. Sore from head to toe, and I was like, "What are you?" And they both were singing the same thing, and I was like, "What are you?"
No, they were both singing the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Like, it was the one person next to me, so I told him.
No.
I was like talking with him about it, and the driver pipes in and was like, "No, it's definitely sore from head to toe." Like, he was really into it. And this is my life that I care about this at all. Where I'm like defending Beck's honor. I'm like, no.
Yeah, and going back to the OCD thing, you're like
no, we've got to get this right.
You have to sing this right.
You don't have herpes, Andrew. Yeah. Stop saying it.
You're not sore from head to toe. You're a loser.
Yeah. Oh man.
That's so funny, dude.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. All right.
But that was a good tangent, though. I like that.
To come back from the edge of reality, I met you when I came to Atlanta. because I'm hired as the middle school pastor for this church.
Yeah.
And then you were either already in middle school. I think you already. Do you remember how old were you when do you have any idea?
So what year was it?
You would have been.
Because it's cool.
2008.
Okay, so I was in 8th grade. You know why I know that? 2008, 8th grade. That's how cool my year was. I graduated 12th grade in 2012. So it's so convenient that I never have to think about it. They're like, oh, it was in 2007. Okay, cool. So I was either finishing 7th grade or going into 8th grade.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So I totally came in and got to hang out with you and got to know you and your brother and your family and everything. But it's funny to think about where I was at in life, because again, for me, it was totally just, well, this is the natural career progression. And it was a big jump. My pay went from, I think I had worked hard. I was like $35,000 at the previous church, where I feeling like, okay, I'm doing well. And then I came down here, and I was going to manage a bunch of people, and it was a big church and everything else. And I remember, I'll never forget, the guy that hired me was like, we're going to offer you $48,000. And I was like, the same kind of thing that I felt when I made $30,000, where I was like, holy cow, all of our financial problems are gone. It's going to be plenty of money. And then the best part was that I was excited and accepted. And then I think, I don't know if he called me the next day or told me later that day, but he was like, actually, I was wrong. It's 46. And I was like, okay. I just, I had I was totally I'm just excited to make more money. But I loved,
that's so funny.
Forever been a hiring thing when I hire people now, where I'm something you never want to do is be like, we're going to give you $60,000 and then come back and actually it's 55, but still, we want you. You're like, okay. Anyway.
I'm slightly less excited, but okay.
Okay. Curbs the enthusiasm slightly, but it's fine. And so
you should have just told me 55 in the beginning. I would have.
You said 46. Always err on the low side, and it's everybody likes it when you come back and say, actually, we checked. You're worth more than we thought. We're going to give you 46 instead of 44. I would have been like, yeah.
That's a pro tip right there. So if you're out there and you're trying to hire people, lowball them and then give them what you're actually going to get.
Okay, the other pro tip is, that is a pro tip.
But if they don't accept it, that sucks.
Always give a lower expectation that you exceed, right? Because I would far rather tell a client, hey, it's going to take us a week to get you this information, and then come to them in 3 days. And they're like, ooh, this is great. Instead of saying, I'll have it tomorrow, and then coming in 3 days. The practical reality was the same. They got it in 3 days, but the expectation changed the whole experience they had, right?
Exactly. Managing expectations is huge.
Yeah, dude. But no, I learned a lot about those kind of things being in that environment. And totally took it. And it's funny because we came down and we were here, and I was working, and really still didn't have a clue who I was supposed to be long term. It's kind of in it and doing it. I had a great time doing it. But at the same time, my wife became really, really ill. And so we'd had a little bit of that in Indiana, but really when we came down to Georgia, and we didn't know what was going on. She'd had some postpartum depression from our younger son, not because of him, if he listens to this, not because of you, dude. It's just reality that a lot of women struggle with postpartum depression, and we kind of expected that. But then it just seemed like it was getting worse. And so we went to a doctor, and he prescribed this medication for her, and she starts taking this medication and feels a little better. But then it starts getting really bad. So it went from it's getting better to she's feeling really terrible every day. Is that just a psychological thing? Is it she's actually sick? Because it had started with postpartum depression, there was this temptation for all of us to sit and go, what is this really? And not know. And the doctors would sit and tell me sometimes. I remember a doctor pulling me to the side one time after an appointment and being like, it's just mental. She's just struggling in her mind. And
whoa.
And what we now can look back on is that she had a very rare, basically an allergic response to the medication. So she's on this medication, and her body had no ability to metabolize it. Whoa. And so the more she took, the more it just built up in her system, which was in essence killing her slowly. And when we were working with one of the top psychiatrists in Atlanta, that we had somehow knew a person who got us in. And his response when she was getting worse was to double the medication. He was like, well, you're just not taking enough of it.
Whoa.
So then...
And that's a psychiatrist.
Not just psychiatrist. I'm talking literally you can't see him. because he's so booked and literally considered one of the top psychiatrists in the country.
I heard
it's sorry
to
fathom,
go off on something,
No,
but I
you
heard
can't.
a joke the other day that was like, why is it that the best doctors you can never see?
Right. Yeah. Makes no sense.
He's so good you can't even get an appointment with this guy.
I did call recently. I was trying to sit down with an estate planning attorney because I was interviewing attorneys to meet with my clients basically. And the receptionist was like, well, she would have a spot open on the afternoon in 4.5 months. And I was like, okay, we're good. Like, I'm just, on the one hand, it's great to be busy. On the other hand, holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway.
I'm like, want to do a podcast tomorrow?
You're like, I'm free now.
Yeah.
Let's do it now.
Yeah, I'm like, let's plan for next week. I'm like, what are you doing tomorrow afternoon?
I love it, man. I love it. So she is getting worse and we have no idea. And it was like House, if you ever watched House years ago, where you'd go to doctor after doctor trying to figure out what was going on and nobody could give you any clarity at all. And somehow no one connected the dots. Maybe this is from the medication. Like, even though now researching it, every possible warning sign of basically constant overdose on a medication was there. She was having seizures every day.
Whoa.
She was sleeping. She couldn't get out of bed. I mean, she might be in bed 19 hours out of 24 hours.
Ooh.
By the end, she couldn't walk up the stairs. Like, it was so bad that we had to move out of the apartment we were in. We moved in to her parents' basement and just to have some help with the kids.
Wow.
And she was not able to function. It was getting so bad. I mean, I would carry her into doctor's appointments and stuff.
That's crazy.
And yet here I am trying to work in a context where, to be honest, there was very little understanding of what was going on with her or of what was going on with us. I get that because I didn't understand, like, on the one hand, but on the other hand, like, it was just, well, in the conservative Christian world, often it's like, well, if you're a pastor, your wife supports you. Like, she's running the house and you're running the work, and that's the way it's supposed to work. And what happens when she can't?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, and I wish I could go back and change even how I responded, or knowing what I know now. But eventually, finally got so bad that our primary care doctor basically was the hero here, where she's a genius, and she was like, "We're going to figure this out." And we were able to figure out something called Serotonin Syndrome, but it was a really rare offshoot where it was metabolizing. And I'll never forget calling that psychiatrist once we understood it, and saying she's going to stop the medication immediately, and saying, our doctor has figured out it was Serotonin Syndrome, and his response was, "That hardly ever happens." That was his exact words. Meredith is literally being killed by this medication that he put her on, that he doubled, which I'm sure he's worried about a lawsuit at this point. And his response was, well, that hardly ever happens. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. But she started getting better, which was amazing. But all of that was, we had so much financial fallout. We were just totally in a terrible place, and she couldn't work, right? So I'm trying to support the kids and living in a basement. And it was so kind of my in-laws to let us live there, but literally, like, if you turned on the toaster oven, the entire electrical grid would just, like, and the whole thing was shut down. Like, you had to, it was just, it was a tough reality. And we were in a terrible place financially. We owed all this money from all sorts of things, but a lot of it from her being so sick. And I remember we called, there was a nonprofit in Atlanta, Nationwide is an amazing nonprofit. It used to be called, I think it's called Credibility now. It used to be Consumer Credit Counseling, but it's a nonprofit that helps you consolidate debt and get back on your feet. And there's a lot of things out there like that are scams. Totally norm. But this is actually like a really neat nonprofit. So we called and we had this appointment with a debt counselor, and we're talking about, I'm explaining all the debt, I'm explaining my income, and I'll never forget, like, she paused, she was calculating all the numbers, and she was like, well, Mr. Burns, I think you just need to declare bankruptcy.
Whoa.
Like, you've got, basically, like, there's no way with the income you make that you can get out of this, so here's what you got to do. And that was such a crushing moment for me, because I'd had all this, like, well, we can do this, or we can figure it out. And it was like, oh, I guess we failed. Like, I don't know what to do. And that was probably a turning point for me.
So you did file bankruptcy?
We didn't. That's what she said, though, and I totally see why she said it now. We didn't. We actually did get on a plan to pay back the debt, and we just started slowly but surely going after it. But I'll tell you, that kind of hitting rock bottom of like, it's not working out the way it's supposed to. You know, my wife has a sickness she was never supposed to have. I've got 2 kids. I don't have my own home. I'm living in somebody's basement. You know, my job, I'm realizing finally I'm owning the fact I'm not providing for my family. Like, it's not enough for us to live in this area. There's no way, like on my income alone. And all that kind of crushed in on me. And I think I've been living with some sort of like optimistic denial for a long time. And that was it. So basically left the church and was like, we knew we had to move in a different direction. And the only job the first job that popped up was an elder from the church ran like a financial group, which really was a life insurance company. I didn't realize that, honestly, at first. But he was like, we'll give you 100% commission to come in and, you know, learn the ropes and sell life insurance, basically, and then become a financial advisor, whatever that meant. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what that is, but it is kind of interesting to me, especially because we'd just been through that. I was like, I'm fascinated I see the practical impact of this on people's lives. Like, I see how my life has been impacted by where we don't have the money and we're stressed all the time. And not that I was at the point where it was like everything's about having money, but more like I see that can cause just absolute disruption. So we just went for it, man. We literally moved into a place, like found a house that we could rent, got a Honda Pilot that was big enough to fit the kids, and had never done that a day in my life. And it was kind of a burn the ships moment. Like, either this is going to work and I'm going to sell enough to make it, or I don't know, but there is no staying. Like, we can't live in this any longer. So we just dove out.
Wow.
Which was a total crazy experience. I would not want to do it again.
Yeah.
But that was it, and it worked. So.
Wow. So you were selling life insurance.
In essence, I was a financial advisor, quote unquote, which I found out meant nothing, right? So I found out that these things I'd never known about the financial world, because it was totally doing great with my words here, opaque. I mean, it was like I would look at people doing planning and pretty much lump them all into the same bucket. Like, that's just, I guess they all do the same thing, right? And I had no idea that basically what had happened is the entire industry, like 50 years ago, you had a life insurance salesman, and you had a person that did your car insurance and your renter's insurance and stuff. And then you had an investment, a stockbroker you'd work with. You had all these individual specialties, but at some point, culturally, we dropped all that and we called everybody financial advisors, and they all get the same licensing. So like, the guy that works for Northwestern Mutual, a big insurance company, and the guy that works for Fidelity probably have the same licensing. So literally, they can do the exact same thing. But of course, if they are working for Northwestern Mutual, it's no big shock that every time you meet with them, you buy life insurance, right? It's like there's kind of A plus B equals C there. Or you meet with the guy from Fidelity, and shockingly, you go get some investments, because that's what Fidelity does. And so after being there
Funny how that works.
I love learning about life insurance. I'm totally a weirdo where I like that. Like, I was fascinated by the way insurance works, and I still am. And I'm a huge proponent of it. But I began to kind of see behind the curtain and go, it's all kind of a sales gimmick that, like, I can portray myself, and I really want to be a financial planner. I want to help you with all of your life, but I'm in a system that's really wants me to sell life insurance, right?
And it's not like life insurance is a bad thing, and a lot of times that is a good solution, but it might not always be the best solution for everybody, or whatever.
I'm thrilled with the fact that I was trained that way, because a lot of people, and I'm going to get super nerdy here, but a lot of financial advisors are trained as investment folks. And I get that, because investing is sexy, right? It's like everybody wants to invest their money and grow their money.
Totally.
0 out of 100 people want to have a discussion about life insurance. There is no it's only if they're in crisis, or they just lost somebody important to them, so they go, oh crap, I need to get this stuff. But nobody wants to do that. Almost all of them would love to talk about what's going on in the market, right? At least that's so. I'm so thankful that I was trained on the insurance side first before I fell in love with investing, because it totally changed the way that I approach planning, and I respect and value that. But capitalism, baby, if you work for an insurance company, you better believe that the incentives you have are tied to how much insurance you're moving. The best reward trips, the higher pay, the higher bonus payouts are literally tied to how much of this insurance product have you moved. So even though a client might meet with you and go, this person is looking at my overall financial situation, and I really was I can authentically say I was trying to do help them in every way I could, right? But the reality of the system I was in was built so that everything pointed towards life insurance. And that's no different than, again, at a Fidelity Investments where it's going to now be tweaked and tied to the investment world, because that's what the company does. That's their bread and butter. So anyway, but I'm so thankful I learned the ropes there. But that's really why, if you go now, why do I have my own company, and why is it independent? Why are we not tied to any one larger insurance company or investment company? It's purely because I see whether we like it or not, there's a bias, there's an impact to that.
Totally.
And I wanted to, as much as we could, just remove that and say, well, if you need this, then we can bring that tool to bear. But if you don't need it, I have zero reason that I'd bring it to you.
Gotcha. That's really awesome.
My trip to Maui isn't dependent on whether you choose this insurance product over this other one, right? And the industry is starting to change in that, but that was really eye-opening to me, that beneath the facade of objectivity that most advisors put out there, you really need to know what their structure is and how they're set up, because suddenly it's not surprising anymore. No matter how great they are, if they work for an insurance company, you better believe their solution probably is a big pile of insurance. And maybe that is what you need, but how can you trust that if that's what their benefits are tied to?
And that's the only option or whatever.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's really cool, man, because it feels like a natural progression. Like you said, you want to be as unbiased as possible and actually help people not tied to a product or whatever. One thing that I wanted to kind of get into, I know you said we've got until 12, so we've got 15 more minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I'm talking about The Walking Dead. I'm sorry.
No,
we'll
it's
get
okay.
Back on.
No,
we'll
dude,
back
it's
on
good.
Financial plan wagon.
It's good.
Let's go.
No, I think we could have 10 podcasts. Seriously, I'd love to have you on again. But I feel like a lot of my listeners are going to be people around my age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger.
Yep.
And I would say the people that are probably listening to your podcast, a lot of times are going to be on the older side of things, just because, like you said, a lot of times when people are interested in financial planning, it's towards either they're having an empty nest or they're having to start to think about those kind of things. Let's be real.
You're trying to say that I'm not interested in young people?
Not at all. That's why I'm
trying to exhilarating for the younger crowd.
I'm trying to spin this and show them why it is, because I'm really fascinated by it. I'm very interested in it.
Yeah.
But
I appreciate that, man.
Of course. And I've listened to your podcast. I really enjoy it.
Man.
And
I really do. It really actually matters. Okay. I'll cut to the chase then, because I think I know where you're going with this.
How do we practically give people that are younger advice?
Yeah. Because that has become more and more a passion for me because of what I said at the beginning. I had no practical feedback there. I had no clue what I should expect to make. I had no clue that I should negotiate if I got offered a job. I shouldn't just take what they offered me. I should get there's so much practical in the world of how money works that we've hidden from kids because culturally it wasn't acceptable. Most people don't know what their parents make. Most people don't know how much money their dad makes. The coolest thing you can do as a family, by the way, for anybody who's about to have kids that listens to your podcast, is just take a month's worth of cash out of the bank. It might take you 6 months to get this, but at some point, actual dollars, if you make $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month net, whatever it is you make, lay it on the kitchen table when your kids are there and have them freak out. Put it in $10 bills, whatever, it's a lot of money. And then show them concretely you moving those dollars based on what actually happens in life. So it starts with $3,500, but we got to pay taxes, so that comes off the table. Then we got to pay utilities, we got to pay rent, we got to pay for groceries, we got to pay for gas, we got to pay whatever it is, and then let them concretely see the pile that remains.
You could even practically do that with some really good fake money. I've seen some pretty good fake money.
You could totally do that with fake money. I do think there's something about, like,
of course,
there's a wow factor to, holy cow, there is $3,000 on the table.
It is
for
pretty,
a kid. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's freaky.
You can do this with your high score. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are, but where is that concrete training? So my biggest thought to you guys, I was talking with a college student. You can tell me if this resonates because you're right there, man. Not college student. You're past that stuff.
Yeah.
You went your own way, which I loved. Totally loved. But they had just graduated. They were getting their own. They just gotten a job offer, and so right when they accepted this job, they got a mail from the company, and the mail was like, "How much do you want to put in your 401k?" And so, what percentage do you want to do? And they offered her a match. So she was going to get like a 3% match. And then, what do you want to invest in? And she called me because I worked with her parents, and she was like, "Can you just give me thoughts on this? I was going to contribute 5% of my salary, but I think I could actually pull off 8." And she was totally expecting me to say, "Go for 8," because most of us, we don't think financial planning is interesting, but we do know one, like the core thing we've all heard drilled into our heads in every personal finance discussion you've ever had is you got to put away money for retirement. You got to put away money for the future, which is totally important. So most young people I meet going into a job, and this applies to folks in their 50s too, it doesn't matter, is like this constant anxiety of, am I putting enough away? And if I'm not, like guilt over that, like I'm not going to be okay in the future. But I think that's got to change. Like what I told her was, how much do you have sitting in a savings account, an emergency fund right now? And she was like, $300. And I was like, before you put $1 into retirement savings, before you get any of that money, you've got to have 3 months of income sitting doing nothing. And I call that idea foundation first. It's something I talk about annoyingly often right now. But I think that's probably if there was a core issue with most people's finances, it's often not how much they make. Like the first thing we point to is, I got to go drive Uber more on the side so I can have enough money to put money away. The reason we live in anxiety about our money, whether you're 20 or 50, is because there's no liquid funds there. So every time an emergency pops up, which it will, right? Like when was the last time you had to have money unexpectedly? I'm sure
car stuff.
There you go, car stuff. It could be anything, right? The moment it pops up, if you don't have 3 months of income sitting there, what happens? You use your credit card. You borrow money from a 401k if you have one. I mean, most people have loans, even young people I meet on their 401k. You immediately have to go somewhere where you have debt. And now that debt, if you can't pay it off immediately, is charging you a ton of money, right? You're getting crazy interest charges on it. So all of our first instinct is go put money away for retirement. But that's actually not at all what you should do starting out. You should, as long as it takes, it could take 1 year, 3 years, I don't care, until you have 3 months of your needs covered sitting in a savings account doing nothing, do nothing else. Once you've got 3 months sitting in a savings account, then you go, what's the next step? And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to give to retirement. No, don't give to retirement. The next step is open a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA, not to get nerdy on you, but is an after-tax retirement vehicle. So now I am putting money away for retirement, but because it's after tax, every dollar I put into the account, I can pull back out liquid. So if you put $3,000 into it and it grows to $4,000 because the market goes up, the $3,000 you put in, you can take back out with no harm, no foul, no penalty. The $1,000 of growth you have to leave in. But a 401k, you can't pull the money back out. That stuff's locked away till you're 59 and a half. You could take a loan on it, but then you're just taking out debt, right? So again, step one, liquid, boring money in a savings account, because now you feel confidence. It's the foundation. Now it's like, oh, I can handle an emergency. Then you put money into a Roth IRA, which again, more liquidity. So now you've got $6,000 in a savings account, but you've also got $3,000 that you could pull back out of an investment account. Once those two things are done, now, okay, go put money into the match. Go put money into, if you have an employer match. Now get that free money back. But most of us do that out of order, and then we live so much of our life worried about money because we don't have any funds sitting there.
Totally. And
there you go. There's
I like the 3 months of liquid in the savings. That's like that seems like a really good rule of thumb.
You never want lazy money. Like, I meet people that have a lot of money sitting in savings because they just don't know how to invest, or they're worried about money in the market, or whatever it is, and I get that. You want just enough that no crisis you hit, within any sort of conceivable boundary, is going to wreck you. But you don't ever want it to get more than that, where you have money that could be working for you, it could be growing and actually setting you up for the future, but it's just sitting doing nothing.
Yeah, my friend Austin Distel made a Facebook post in this group that we have recently that was like, when you think of a millionaire, what do you consider a millionaire? Is it someone who actually physically has $1 million in their checking account? Or is it a person who lives $1 million lifestyle? Or is it the person who has $1 million in net worth? Like, what is a millionaire? People say it all the time. Is it someone who makes $1 million a year? Is it someone who's made $1 million throughout their life? Like, what conceptually is a millionaire?
Right.
And it's so interesting because you're so right about, there's lots of people that do have $1 million sitting just there.
Totally.
But that's not really ideally what you want, especially if you can put it in something like a Roth IRA where it's liquid, it's after tax. You could pull it out at any point with no penalties. Right. So that makes a whole lot of sense. One other thing that I was thinking about to kind of go back to young people is a lot of my friends, I'll hear all the time, they'll ask me stuff like, Andrew, how do you afford to travel so much? Or like, do your parents pay for you to travel a lot? Or like, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes, we take family vacations or whatever. Like last couple weekends ago, we went to Washington, D.C.
Sure.
And my parents paid for the whole thing. Like I barely paid anything. I did do a couple other things for fun on the side and I paid for them, but whatever. But, for example, in a couple weekends, I'm going to Europe for 9 days, and my parents are not paying a dime of that.
That's amazing.
And they always ask, people always ask me a lot of, how do you have money to afford that or whatever? And a lot of my explanation is, well, I don't go out a lot. I try to not go out a lot. That saves a lot of money. You can easily spend $100 on a bar tab on a Saturday night. Or take.
Totally.
I don't have a girlfriend,
right.
So
that's the best way. You don't have a girlfriend.
So that's not eating up anything.
Actually, the real secret to long-term wealth. There you go.
Exactly. Don't have a girlfriend. Don't ever get married. Don't have kids.
Yeah, it's amazing how much
you
money.
get to keep all your money.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Awesome. No, but and it's this kind of idea of the compound effect. The whole penny saved, a penny earned. Obviously, I do splurge. Obviously, I do go out to eat. Obviously, I do these things, but on a practical level, I try as much as possible to think about my purchases on a practical level of, am I really going to want this in 2 weeks? Am I really going to, and obviously I'm not perfect. Everyone screws up on that kind of stuff. But what kind of practical stuff can, you give where people are like, yo, I really love to have 3 months in my savings, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck. How do I practically even get to that point?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it is easy to say. That's where I say, it could take you 3 years to get that much income sitting there, and I get that. It's a daunting thing. I think there's a few things there. One is, it's not always about how much you make. We always tend to go to, I got to pick up a second or a third or a fourth job. Like, I know people that work multiple jobs. There is a time for that. Like, I had to go make more money, right? I hit that point in my life where it was like, this isn't working. Like, I got to make more. But often it is things that are like just little tiny shifts of direction that capture extra dollars. And that could be in so many ways, dude. I think you bring it up when you talk about like even just evaluating the purchases you make. It doesn't mean don't ever splurge. It just means have an idea how much you're spending on stuff. And you go, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, I know with our clients we have something, but there's 1,000 free versions. This Mint is a great example of a free version of this, where you don't even have to do anything. It'll just tell you what you're spending money on. Right? That exists.
Like, you just plug in your credit card information, it literally breaks it down of where you're spending your money.
If you're using a credit card, most credit companies do that for you now. But even if you're using your debit card, some banks have this, but you can basically just set it to track. And in a month, you can sit and turn it on, and here comes your graph showing you, well, this much was on entertainment, this much was on food. Just knowing where you spend it helps you to change the direction. And if you can start going, okay, I spent $200 a month. Like, I was looking at the statistic on millennials is, we don't spend money, we being millennials. I'm not a millennial, but I'm close. I can see it in the distance.
In your spirit.
In my spirit. That generation spends less money on clothing and on malls and things like that. Used to, like, for my generation, were a big deal. And it's almost entirely transferred over to like eating out, like food. Like, that's where I'm going to spend my money now and things like that, which totally makes sense. But if you can see, all right, I spent $200 my last month on eating out. Is there a practical way I could only spend $150? Is that feasible for me?
Totally.
Because if I had 50,
cook.
if you cook, right? But that feels like a monumental task to a lot of people. Like, well, that would change your life. It would change. How can you make little shifts where overall you look at a month and you captured $50?
Totally.
And that $50. And the other thing is automate that stuff, man. You can't. The moment that I have to physically go in and transfer that money is death and destruction, right? It's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to see it. That's why a lot of planners love 401ks, because, you know, because you don't ever see the money. And it's like, well, if I can trick you into thinking it doesn't exist, you'll save it. But even if it's something where you just automatically, in your direct deposit from your part-time job, you have them drop $50 into a savings account and the rest of the money goes into your checking account. And you have to actually physically go take it out of the savings to use it, right? Just those little bits, you amazed how quick that builds up.
A little bit of a barrier. Yeah, that's a good point. One thing that I try to do too is have that buyer's, like, there's always that thing where you see something you want to buy it immediately. Like, for example, I wanted an external hard drive for my computer. Because even though I bought a new computer, I'm using a lot of storage with the podcast now, and I want to have somewhere I can back stuff up. So I was like, which should I buy, all this stuff. And I put it in my cart, and I was about to click purchase. I'm like, I'm going to sleep on this for like 2 days. And I ended up buying it.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I was like, am I going to, should I think about this a little bit? And I think that's a really good habit to get in the idea of, because a lot of times people are thinking, well, even with Amazon Prime, I'm not going to get this for 2 days, and I can always return it, so I'll just buy it now. But it's like, once you get it in the mail, the chances of you returning it are so slim. Yeah. Because you actually have to take that step to going and doing it. And, Amazon can be just a money sucker.
Well, today, we're recording this today. Today is Prime Day, right? So I haven't gotten on there to check it out, but...
Don't go. You're gonna
I totally would fall into that.
And there's so many things on Amazon, on Prime, where I'll see something that I want. Like last night I was on it, and I was looking at all this stuff, and most of the things that I wanted were slight iterations or better versions of things I already had. Like, oh, this portable, like I've got this little power bank right here. I'm like, oh, this new version charges my phone 2.1 times faster than, well, this one only charges it 2 times. Or, this one has little removable fins on it so I can put my phone and rest it. Like I can have my phone sitting in it. Ooh, that's cool. Just like dumb stuff. And then I had to sit and be like, Andrew, if it wasn't on Prime Day, and that was the regular price, and you didn't know that there was a discount, would you even be thinking about buying this? Like, because we have this weird thing in our brain where we're like, oh, I'm getting a discount, so I have to do it. Like, there's this girl that I work with, she listens to the podcast. Hey, Kelsey, if you're listening to this. But she always is talking about the deals she's getting. Right. Like, constantly. She's always like, oh, well, this weekend I went to this, blah, 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 it's 25% off. Oh, well, oh my gosh, you gotta go to this restaurant this weekend, they have a deal, blah, 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 blah. She's always all about the deals. And like, I've called her out on it a couple times because it's funny, I'm like, you're always all about the deals, Kelsey, what's up with that? Yeah. But the funny thing is a lot of times, it's like if you didn't even know that the deal existed, you have to think about, don't look at the slashed out price, just look at the price that you're paying and think, is this a fair price for what I should be getting, and do I need this thing? Or am I simply buying it because it's a perceived value that, oh, I'm actually getting this thing that's worth more. But a lot of the times, if you're really getting a deal, the company wouldn't be making money. Yeah, it's a psychology of it. Like, it's a little scary how much folks that are building this and building out pricing and stuff understand the way that we work and the way that what will hit that button for us to make us go, oh, yeah, okay. Like you were saying with managing expectations, telling someone it's going to take 7 days and then it ends up taking 3 or whatever. Yeah, we have a natural rush of endorphins when it's like, ooh, this was supposed to be $100, but I could get it right now for $60. And it's not like a logical thought. It's not like a thought process I walk through. It's just this immediate feeling of I'm winning in some way. This is good. Like I am winning this one, right? Like, and you have that. It's the natural urge to always come out ahead. Well, I'm taking this company for a ride, and they're laughing as they win, right? They're laughing on the way to the bank. Totally. And when you talk about this, it makes me think. And I know I'm the one that said I have to go, so I'll close. Yeah, we can wrap it up right now. But it makes me think like one of the big things I think for young people, regardless, for me certainly, is I tend to think about financial planning or even talking about investing and stuff as the most important piece of this is the numbers in the account.
And I think that's what turns a lot of people away, especially younger people, is like, I know it's important, but I don't really, do I really want to sit and talk about how I can turn the $500 I have into $800? Is that like the exciting thing to discuss? Mm-hmm. There's a small amount of people that get really psyched about that. They just want to talk about how do I grow my money, and that's how they're built, right? But a lot of people are like, I just really want my money to be safe. I don't care. I'm 25. I don't give a rip about any of this stuff right now. And we've got to get to this place where it's not about whether you retire, like the amount of money in your account when you retire, or the amount of the fact that it's 3 months of savings in your emergency fund versus 2. It's purely about like, what life do you want to live? What experiences do you want to have? We call the show More Than Money because money is just a means to an end, 100%. Like, who cares if Andrew has enough money to go to Europe for 9 days, and you can sustain that lifestyle, then I don't need to know how much you have necessarily in savings or how much you have, that those are just the means to the end that you're already experiencing. And if you're able to live this amazing life
without debt too.
Without debt.
That's another thing.
That's remarkable, man.
People,
and if you get married, that might change. If you have kids, that might, like, those are going to shift over time. But like, totally. Most people are always thinking like, it's about, I guess I got to start thinking about, did I make 6% this year or 5%? And all of that's important, but in the end, it's about what life do you want to have and how are you actually going to practically go after that? Because if you don't practically go after it, you end up like a lot of people I meet with in their 50s and 60s who just go, I guess it didn't turn out the way I was hoping it would. Mm. And at some point, it's like that whole complacency thing. You got to own that and say, no, it will not turn out the way that I would want it to, unless I'm the one that says, this is the dreams I have, these are the goals I have for the future. Like, I want to go to Europe for 9 days, doggone it. I'm not going to let my coffee purchases this month not let me fly to Europe, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to change, because that's more important to me.
Yeah.
But it takes intentionality.
The last thing that I want to mention, I thought of this yesterday because this girl messaged me. She lives in England, and I met her last year at this concert in England, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to this big, huge music festival in Belgium when I go to Europe in 2 weeks called Tomorrowland. It's a really big deal.
I remember you told me about it because they had it where we ran the Tough Mudder, which we didn't even talk about.
Yeah, and that was the American version of Tomorrow World, and this is the like original Tomorrowland.
Holy cow. Okay.
So it's like the mecca of like, if you're into like electronic dance music, it's like you must make a pilgrimage at least once to this place.
Have you been before?
I went last year. It was amazing. So I'm taking my brother with me this year, so it'll be super fun. But anyways, she made a comment where I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to Tomorrowland. You should come. And I was like, I know a guy selling a ticket. Granted, the ticket's $1,200, but But when are you ever going to experience that? Exactly.
Yeah.
And she was like, wish I could. Maybe next year, if I have the money, I can go. Mm-hmm. And it was the whole next year if I have the money kind of thing. And I was just like, it makes me sad because, I hate doing this holier than thou kind of thing, saying like, oh, well, I've planned and blah, blah, blah. But, it's true that in order to get the things you want, you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
If you say, so many people make the excuse, well, one day I'll do it. One day is not a day. You've got to make that day a reality somehow. It's not just going to magically happen. And it's not just going to happen because you work full time. You mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. Oh, well, I'm working full time, so I'm, that's enough. It doesn't really matter because you can be squandering that income on coffee, or you've got to really examine what you're spending money on and all that.
No, you got it right, man, because it's like, it is so, we got to get out of the mindset of thinking of planning, because look, I am the least deeply organized. Like, people think about planning of any sort and they're like, oh, that must mean spreadsheets all the time. It must mean knowing how much I spent on toothpaste last year. Like, that's really, and I know people like that. Like, that's what I thought it was when I looked at it. I was like, it was such a turnoff to me to think, oh my gosh, I got to sit and like literally track line item by line item everything I spend, and it just felt overwhelming. And it's like, no. It's literally about, start from the other side. What is it that if you don't do in the next 2 years, you're going to forever regret it? Mm. What is it that if you don't achieve, like if you don't have that thing, or if you don't have that it's not even just money, that relationship, or that, like, what are the things that actually matter to you? How are you going to do them? Mm. That's all it is. And it's not about the spreadsheets, so.
That's a good way of wrapping it up, man. Obviously, any last words? Anything you want to plug? Obviously, people can go listen to your podcast, More Than Money Podcast.
Yeah, the easiest way to find our stuff is if you go, our website's mylifeismore.com, and if you go there, you can find the podcast, our email we do, and all that stuff. But again, everything we do, I didn't talk about this much, but it's just all built to be practical, and it's built to be, again, how do you reach what you want for the future?
And if people are, a lot, especially I said, a lot of young people are going to be listening to this, and they're probably like, well, I don't even have the money to hire a financial planner, let alone even have the money to go buy Starbucks or whatever,
Right.
Should people feel like they can reach out to you and ask you questions, or
Totally. Yeah, no, one of the things that I got sick of in the industry was this, most people were excluded from it. The industry had built itself to be, if you have a lot of money, you can come get our help. And it just drives me crazy, because it's like, look at me. I'm sitting here. I was a youth pastor in terrible financial situation. I needed someone to sit down with me and walk me through that. And yet the industry was built for people that already had a lot of money, right? So if you go to our website, you can ask any question through the site, and it doesn't matter what the question is, we'll get back to you with some practical thoughts. You can sit down with me for a free consultation, whether it's over the phone or actually meeting. And I don't mean that as just so I increase my business. It doesn't matter if you have no money. I have a lot of clients. One of the founding things we said was, we will talk with anybody and we'll do the best we can, no matter what resources they have. So even though we have a fee we charge people, if somebody comes in that doesn't have the money for the fee, we just waive the fee, or we lower it to what they can do. Even if what they can do is $20, because that's what I get excited about. We do. So yeah, phone call. You can send us a question. It's
awesome.
It's whatever. If you want practical thoughts on this, we want to be a resource. So.
That's so awesome, man. Well, cool. Well, Chris, we have to do another podcast. This was super fun. I seriously love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's another thing is I'm trying to figure out when I want to start having repeat guests, because there's a lot of my friends and a lot of my guests that I'm like, dude, that was such an awesome podcast. We need a sequel. So I think this was one of them. This is a really good podcast, man.
So enjoyed you let me be on here, and I appreciate it, dude.
Cool. Well, that's it, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Boom! That was an awesome podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I think I smell a second episode with Chris in the near future. And if you enjoy the sultry sound of Chris's voice and you like what he has to say, make sure you go listen to the More Than Money radio show or the More Than Money podcast, where he shares some of his clients' stories and he provides helpful tips that you, yes, you, with the ears, that you can implement into your life today. And if you want to learn more about what Chris does or get your free consultation, go check out their website, mylifeismore.com, and take the first step in reclaiming control over your finances and ultimately your life. Do it, people. But if you enjoyed this show, I'm sure you have a friend who you think would also enjoy this show. Maybe they would get some value out of it. Who knows? If you take a minute to share it with them, you never know how this episode could impact them. You know what? Maybe there's someone that you have in mind right now that is suffering with debt. They've got student loan debt. They've got credit card debt, whatever it might be. Maybe you share this with them, and this becomes the first step in them reclaiming back control of their finances. How cool would that be? Be pretty awesome. But guess what? It'll never happen unless you share this episode with them. So that's what you should do, okay? And it also helps me get my podcast out to more people. The more people listen to the podcast, the more that I will love you, and the more that this podcast can affect other people. And I really just want more people to listen to it because I think that I'm providing value. People are really, really responding positively to this. So, if a few thousand people that are listening to this right now are enjoying it, who's to say that a few million people wouldn't enjoy it too? So it really would mean a lot if you could share this with a friend. Really, really helps. And also, it wouldn't really hurt to go rate it 5 stars on iTunes either. But that's all I got for today. I'm going to stop self-promoting. But I'm going to be uploading the weekly update for this week, where I will be talking about my upcoming trip to Europe. I'm also going to be visiting 3 different countries and attending the most legendary music festival in the world, Tomorrowland. So stay tuned for that. If you want to find me, go to my website, andrewdeitsch.com, andrewdeitsch.com. You guys know the drill. Thanks for listening, everybody, and I will catch you in the next one. See you soon, everyone.